0-2 pitch. Swing and a miss. Struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of GameDay. This is episode 6 and today I want to be talking about the NBA Finals that just finished up last week. So, pretty crazy stuff. The Warriors go on to defeat the Boston Celtics in 6 games. If I remember correctly, I think I might have predicted that this was going to go to 7, but nope, goes to 6 and the Warriors win. I want to say it's their 4th championship in 8 years, if I'm correct. Yeah, I think it's 4 championships in 8 years, because they lost the one to Cleveland in 2016. They lose 2019 to the Raptors. 2020 was won by the Lakers, 2021 by the Bucks, and so they come back this year and get their, or for Steph Curry, this is his 4th ring, and so it's a pretty crazy accomplishment for them. I mean, if they weren't already solidified as a dynasty, they are now. And, you know, for many, it kind of just shows that while they did need KD, especially for 2 of those rings, you know, they still kind of showed that they're still a good enough squad to win one without him. And, you know, let's kind of take a look back through this for both sides. So, looking at the Warriors sides, because to me, when it comes to this finals, I know a lot of people maybe didn't enjoy it as much, but like to me, this is just like the craziest. Like, this is 2 historic seasons for both sides because of just the turnaround that both franchises saw. You know, for the Celtics within this season and even their previous seasons, and like the Warriors from not making the playoffs for 2 years to now making it back, and the first time they're back in the playoffs, boom, they win a championship. But so looking at the Warriors side, go back to Game 6 of the 2019 Finals. As we all know, Klay Thompson goes down with an injury, and the Raptors end up winning that series, you know, with Kawhi Leonard. And that was also the series. I think KD also got injured, but Klay Thompson goes down. And, you know, I think that one might have just been like a general, maybe like ankle injury or ACL. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, you know, he goes down. And then in the offseason, as we know, Durant leaves for the Nets. And that's involved in a sign-in trade where D'Angelo Russell gets shipped off to the Warriors. And so that would open the door for the Nets to bring in Kyrie Irving. Also in this draft, the Warriors draft Jordan Poole at number 28. And so the next season, you know, people are hoping Klay, or actually no, I think that season Klay just wasn't going to be able to play at all, at least not until like the later half of the year is what they were hoping for. But I think actually the Warriors sat him the entire year, if I remember correctly. So it was only going to start off as a Draymond, D'Angelo Russell, and Steph Curry leading that squad. And yes, as I double check basketball reference here, 2019 to 2020, Klay Thompson did not play at all due to a knee injury. And then so we'll get into the season after as well. But, you know, the season kind of started off rough. And for the Warriors, it didn't get any better as Steph goes down. As we know, he goes down with a broken hand. And they basically chose to sit him, I want to say, like the majority of that season, you know, opting to prioritize, you know, his health rather than, you know, playing this season. Yeah, he only played a total of 5 games. So he got injured, and then they just basically pretty much sat him the whole season, wanting to prioritize recovery rather than forcing him to come back early at any point. And so that's when they kind of go into tank mode, and to further prove it, or not really to further prove it, but because also as well it just wasn't working out, the Warriors end up trading D'Angelo Russell midway through the season for Andrew Wiggins and 2 picks in the 2021 draft that would end up being picks 7 and 14. And the Warriors end that season with the worst record in the league, 15 and 50. They were the 15th seed. And after the 2020 season, they were just looking ahead for 2021 season, because they knew Steph would be coming back healthy, Klay would be coming back healthy. They had the second overall pick. From their tanking season, they still had, a couple key pieces. They were hoping to come back and just, forget about last season. But then, as we all know, Klay Thompson goes down with a torn Achilles during practice. And so that truly kind of sets things in motion to, like, in the sense of, like, it set them back again because, that's one of their key players. And as we know, they end up drafting James Wiseman, who, still have yet to see what is his true potential, what is, if you want to say, we just haven't seen a ton of him, so we don't really know what's going to go on there, if the Warriors are going to trade him or not, But they end up taking him. And the next season, it's the same thing. Low expectations. No one really thinks all too much about the Warriors squad, especially with Klay being out. And they struggled a bit, but, they still attempt to try and push through it. And, like, towards the All-Star break and afterwards, Steph kind of starts... how would you say it? Steph starts getting back in his groove. He starts, being the usual Steph with his crazy high-scoring performances. And at the same time, after sending him to the G League for a stint, Jordan Poole is kind of showing flashes at the same time. And it's still not the greatest season for the Warriors, especially compared to what they were previously seeing, as they finished with the 8th seed. And as we know, this is when the play-in tournament for the NBA was introduced. So they play the Lakers in the play-in, and they end up losing to LeBron and AD. And they still have one more chance where they go against the Grizzlies with John Morant. And they fall short in that game as well, meaning they missed the playoffs for a second season in a row. But... they didn't really let it phase them that much. It hurt to miss the playoffs, but they just, again, we're looking towards, just like in 2019, 2020, or no, 2020, 2021, they're looking towards the next season now, because they know that, expectations were going to be high anyways for the season, seeing as how Klay Thompson was out. And then in the draft, as we mentioned previously, they had the 7th pick and the 14th pick that they got in exchange for D'Angelo Russell, along with Andrew Wiggins getting sent there. They drafted Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. And as we all know from this season, because, just a lot of crazy things, a lot of teams making jumps, a lot of teams kind of not meeting expectations. But at the start, some people were predicting the Warriors to be back, but for the most part, a majority of people just didn't see the Warriors being what they were this season. And the majority of them were only looking towards, like, the typical Nets-Lakers finals, the Bucks making it to the finals maybe, the Suns making a deep run. No one was really predicting the Warriors. I can tell you for sure, I don't think anyone was predicting the Celtics making as far of a run. But that's what they go through. And then... the Warriors, even without Klay, they started off really well. And as we know, like, for the most part, people were like, oh, can't wait to see what it's going to look like for when Klay returns. And as we know, also at the same time, Jordan Poole makes the insane jump that he did, having these crazy performances, working really well in the Warrior system, which is a big part as well, with other key players like Andrew Wiggins also having a reemergence, Many people were considering him a draft bust just because, being the number 1 overall pick and kind of seeing, just his play for other teams. It just wasn't as, how would you describe it? It wasn't living up to the number 1 overall pick kind of name value. But here in the Warrior system, he's thriving. He's probably had the best season of his career, and obviously they cap it off with the championship. Obviously Klay Thompson returns, and it's slow at first because, of course, it's been like 2 years since he's been able to play basketball, but he finds his way back, maybe not to the original prime of his career, but still a very valuable contributor for this team. And the Warriors finish as the 3 seed with a 53-29 record, and in the first round They beat the Nuggets with MVP Nikola Jokic 4-1. Then in the second round, they beat Ja Morant and the Grizzlies 4-2. And in the Western Conference Finals, they beat Luka and the Mavs 4-1. And so they make it to yet another finals after 2 years of not making the playoffs and 3 years since their last appearance. And so they go through this hard-fought battle, as we mentioned, in 6 games. They beat Boston, and Steph finally gets his finals MVP, and that's his 4th ring. And the Warriors are 2022 NBA champions once again. And to me, like I said, I know other people might not agree, but that's just 2 historic turnarounds. As I'll get into the second one, but I would consider this a historic turnaround for the Warriors franchise, to go from missing the playoffs twice to just the moment you come back with a fully healthy squad, you just go straight through the competition and get your ring again after all that. And without, key players like Kevin Durant leaving in free agency, finally getting Klay Thompson back healthy, being able to develop Jordan Poole into what he is, as well as, perfectly scheming Andrew Wiggins into this system, that's just, it's impressive from them as well. And, going on to the other side with Boston, it's just impressive with them as well, because, the previous seasons, it's always been like, oh, Boston's pretty young. They got some pretty, they got rising stars. They got pretty good players. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, a great duo with great pieces around them. Like Marcus Smart. They brought back Al Horford, who, for the most part, I'm a Philly fan, so I remember what Al Horford was for us. But I know for Boston, he's always been pretty good because they kind of know how to play and scheme him, much like how the Warriors know or figured out how to scheme Andrew Wiggins. The Celtics always know how to scheme Al Horford in their lineups. But, I consider it a turnaround because, the previous seasons, it's always kind of just been, not the best to the Celtics. They've always kind of had some pretty bad luck, if you want to say, with their previous encounters, especially in the playoffs. Yeah, so you look at like their past couple seasons, they've, for the most part, always gone out in either the Eastern Conference Finals, the first round, the semis. Their the 2019-2020 season, obviously saw them lose to the Heat in the semifinals? Was that the semifinals? Let me make sure. No, the Eastern Conference Finals. And then last season they lost to the Nets in 5. In 5. In the first round. So, not the best record you can boast, I guess you could say, from the final. I mean, since 2015, it's all, 2014-2015, lost in the Eastern Conference first round. 15-16, Eastern Conference first round. 17-18, lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. 18-19, Eastern Conference semifinals. 2019-2020, Eastern Conference Finals. 2020-2021, Eastern Conference first round. It's not that bad, but the Celtics just don't have the best of luck. I mean, they can at least say they made it pretty far, but like last season especially, it was like they lost in the first round. And so this year, hoping to come back from that better, but then as we saw, it wasn't exactly the best start for the Celtics. They went 18-21 to begin their season, And like that was just kind of crazy to see them go from that to then turning around and finishing the season with a 51-31 record. That's the second seed in the Eastern Conference, and they went on an impressive run because in the first round, I talked about it in a previous GameDay episode. They go on to sweep the Nets in 4 games. They go on to face the defending champs, the Milwaukee Bucks, and though they were without Chris Middleton, the Celtics are still able to pull it off in 7 games. And then in the final series against the Heat, they beat them. I forget how many games that one went to. But so, the Celtics make the finals. And for the most part, like I said, no one was kind of expecting that. But, as you watch the playoffs, I can't remember I think I might have predicted them falling to Milwaukee if I remember correctly. But, my thing was just, watching them, you could tell that this was a squad built to make a deep run because of just the fact of just how well they were playing both sides of the ball leading up to the finals. Because they had, of course, Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart. They had, Robert Williams came back in time, I think, from his injuries. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are good enough defenders and also great on the offensive side of things. So, it was just like, to me, like that's another kind of historic turnaround, because it's like you look at their previous successes, and also just this season alone, to be, like I said, to be able to go from towards the halfway point, going from 18-21 to 51-31, meaning they only lost 10 more games after that point, and that was like from January till May, they only lost 10 games. Like, that to me is just a crazy turnaround for their season. And like I said, so they make it to the finals, and they obviously lose in 6. And, you kind of feel for the Celtics because they fought hard, and, they prided themselves as a defensive team and all that. But, man, it just didn't work out in their favor. And, I mean, the Celtics can pretty much still pride themselves on being a defensive team, because as we saw, none of the wins were really a blowout, as we see. Game 2 when the Warriors won, it was 107-88. Game 4, 5, and 6, 107-97, 104-94, 103-90. It wasn't like there was huge gaps in between their play. They still kind of held it down, but it's just not much you can do when you're playing against Steph Curry. And it also, Tatum, for the most part, also kind of struggled in the series, which was kind of their downfall. I mean, as we saw in Game 1, Game 1, they won against the Warriors, if I'm not mistaken, but Tatum shot 17% from the field and 20% from 3 that game. What did he score? He had 12 points. And then, every game after, he had, the points to show for it. 28, 26, 23, 27. With only in the elimination game, Game 6, he had 13. But, his shooting performances still weren't the greatest. So his splits are Game 1, 17%. Game 2, 42%. Game 3, 39. Game 4, 34. Game 5, 50%. From the field, and then Game 6, 33% from the field. It's not the best, but the one thing, of course, that people are looking at is the turnovers from this entire playoffs, and especially this series, where 2 turnovers in Game 1, 4 in Game 2, 2 in Game 3, 6 in Game 4, 4 in Game 5, and 5 turnovers in Game 6. Not really what you want to see from your star player, but, the one thing that people have been mainly discussing, and it is partially true in some point, is that Boston just doesn't have that facilitator point guard that they really need to move that offense, and so they always have to kind of rely on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for that. And, it's not exactly their strong suit, so that's why we saw so many turnovers from Tatum, having to, be the facilitator of this offense when it's not necessarily his strongest suit. And so he kind of struggled. Boston overall kind of struggled defensively scheming against the Warriors, as they kind of took advantage of some disadvantages. But the main one was obviously just, what do? Do you put all your attention on Curry, which in turn allows for Jordan Poole to go off? Because, Jordan Poole, for the most part, as we saw, especially because of times when he'd come off the bench, it was he'd see most of, or not when he was coming off the bench, when he was in the starting lineups, he would find a lot of his success because the teams were too busy focusing attention on Steph and Clay, and he'd see that success. So it's what are you gonna do? Are you gonna put all your attention defensively on Steph Curry and then just allow Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson to take care of most of the work? Or, as we saw in multiple games, they were kind of just leaving Steph on an island, which at times it worked, and other times it was just Steph being Steph, being the crazy 3-point shooter and overall offensive player that he is, being able to score out of nowhere. It wasn't there wasn't really much Boston could do in this sense. It was just too overwhelming in the fact that there's too many good players out there for them to guard. And while they have the players to guard in Tatum, Brown, Smart, the Warriors just completely took advantage of them defensively, and that's what helped them get this win. You know, it overall came down to the Warriors having more experience, and I wouldn't necessarily say better coaching, because as we saw, the Celtics coach was just crazy for this turnaround, you know, and he coached them as perfectly as he could, you know, but it just came down to experience in the playoffs, and, you know, obviously Steve Kerr and the Warriors just have that experience. And so that wraps up our 2021-2022 NBA season with the Warriors as our champs. And there's a lot to go down in this offseason, as we're seeing recently in the news. Kyrie Irving and the Nets are kind of at an impasse. We're still waiting to see. I don't know if it's happening already, but we might still be waiting to see what happens with James Harden and the Sixers. The Mavs made a trade for Christian Wood, so the Mavs are already looking to improve and build around Luka more. Next season, the Nuggets are hoping to have MPJ and Jamal Murray back healthy. The Bucks are hoping to get Chris Middleton back healthy. There are rumors that the Bulls are going to be trading certain players from their team. Obviously, the Celtics and Warriors will look to, get younger at certain positions, re-sign key players, bring in key players. You know, like the Celtics are probably going to be in the market looking to get a better point guard upgrade, in the sense of one who can truly start, because Peyton Pritchard and Derek White did the best they could, but they're not that they're good players, but they're more so like the type you'd want that can provide that extra bit of heat off the bench, whereas Boston, especially as demonstrated in the series, they desperately need someone who can elevate the offense as the starting point guard and kind of be solidified in that position as the starting point guard. Obviously, the Lakers, they got to look to see what they're gonna do, especially with their situation of players. The Clippers are gonna hope to get back Kawhi Leonard healthy, because it's been a while since we've seen him. The Heat, I don't know. To me, it's like the Heat have good players, but I just can't see them ever making a run, and I don't know what exact moves they can make to make that run. Obviously, younger teams like the Grizzlies, the Cavaliers, the Raptors, they're going to look to make certain signings to get better, as well as just kind of put into place, just what exactly are their goals for the next season. Whether that's making the playoffs or, just making it further in the playoffs. And, it's just going to be a crazy offseason. I can't wait to see more of the signings that go down. I don't expect it to be a big offseason where big names, but you're going to see some certain players get picked up by teams where, just kind of like the Warriors, they may not be big names, but in the terms of fitting them in their schemes and in their lineups, it's going to work out for those teams and make them successful, because, a lot of times it isn't about pairing the big name players together. It's about pairing the players that work best and have the most chemistry with one another. And that's really why the Warriors have always had success. They never worried about, having the big names. They never worried about pairing Steph Curry with a player that, he may not have meshed well with, Instead, they worked best to build around him an offense that, a team that would best suit him, his play style, and overall the team's play style, Because, yes, Clay is a big name as well, but not like the biggest of names. It's not like, the Warriors ever went out of their way to pair Steph Curry with a star that, perhaps wouldn't have suited his style per se. Like as we saw with the Lakers when they got Westbrook, it was like they have Westbrook, LeBron, and AD, and it doesn't work out because none of those play styles mesh with one another. AD and LeBron, of course, because they won a championship, but Westbrook's style just doesn't mesh well with LeBron and AD. Ben Simmons with Jimmy Butler and Embiid was never going to work out, and Embiid and Simmons alone was never going to work out. Throwing in Harden, Kyrie, and Durant never really worked out. Even though, like I mentioned in Ned's video, we just never really got to see them to their fullest potential. That never really worked out. And, there's many examples of that versus, you see the Warriors having success because they pair along like that. The Bucks had success finding players that would better suit Giannis, such like, well, they already had Chris Middleton and developed him along Giannis, but, they made the trade for Drew Holiday, a defensive key piece on that team, as well as a playmaker who can help out Giannis and help him space the floor a bit. I'm trying to think maybe even historically certain teams like like the Celtics in 2008 when they got Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett with Paul Pierce. All those are big names, but they also mesh pretty well together in play styles. In terms of play style, so that worked out the best for them. So it's not always just about putting the biggest names together. You always just got to worry about the chemistry within these two teams. And the Warriors are just continuing to prove, they're solidifying themselves as a dynasty, and they're just kind of proving that they truly did change the way of basketball. Steph Curry obviously changed it with his play style, but anytime the Warriors win a ring, or I know people are going to bring up their 2 rings with Durant because that was like a super team, but look at 2015 and look at this year, and it still shows that you can have success as long as you are surrounded by the right people. And boy, doesn't that say a lot about life. But with that being said, thank you all for joining for another episode of Game Day. Those are my thoughts on the 2022 NBA Finals. Really enjoyed it, although many games in this playoffs were just simply blowouts. It was still really good to see this fresh batch of talent just making a name for themselves, solidifying their spots, and it was very fresh to just see a variety of teams going at it rather than a lot of times the same old teams. And as well as even if some of those teams that have been there previously for years, seeing them in new forms, like the Celtics, they've been in the playoffs. I think they have the longest active streak, but, being able to see just the way their team has developed was really cool as well. But with that being said, as always, remember, many things in this life may seem impossible, but if you fight for your dreams will fight for you.